This is the week Debo comes to town. I've always referred to the Baltimore Ravens as Debo because, like the Friday character, they play with that physical, in your face, punch first style, take no prisoners attitude and mentality. Joining me is Isaiah Smalls, Miami Herald Dolphins reporter. Isaiah, Dolphins have a Thursday night game against the Baltimore Ravens. As I've said, these games are usually division games. Division games, the Miami Dolphins know the Jets and the Patriots and the Buffalo Bills, as does the opponent knows them as well. You play them twice a year, every single year. You're familiar with them. You know their strengths, their weaknesses. It's easier to put together a game plan. It's easier to operate that game plan without practices. This is one of those rare instances where a Thursday night game is not a division rivalry game. Baltimore comes to Miami's house. The Dolphins are at home, so they don't have to travel. However, they only have two walkthroughs, no practices, two walkthroughs of a new game plan to execute against the Ravens. Do you think they can continue the sharp play that they played against the Falcons?
I think they can try to, but I think the physicality, might affect them a little bit because let's be honest, the Falcons didn't seem like a physical team like that. Like they didn't necessarily punch back when they were punched in the mouth, right? The Ravens are a team that's going to, if not punch you first, is definitely going to punch back, right? And especially with Lamar returning home in his first game in 4 weeks. Yeah, about a month. Like he's going to be playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because one, his team needs him, right? The Ravens are have a middling record. Of course, they beat the Bears last week, but it hasn't been 2-5. They haven't been hasn't been smooth sailing for them either, right? So I think it's kind of gonna be the Lamar show, right? And so my biggest thing is how will that, to me, that's the greatest rushing duo of all time, like Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, right? So how are they gonna handle that? Obviously they did a good job of curving Bijan inside, making him try to run in between the tackles, and they were there at all times. But now you have a guy that not only is going to hand it off to someone that is of Bijan's caliber, if not better. Obviously, Derrick Henry has reached higher highs than Bijan has, but obviously he's been in the league a minute. So how will that
say he's slower than Bijan? Because
I'm not saying that. I'm not
saying
Derrick
Henry is posted some of the fastest miles per hour speeds in the game.
I didn't say that. I did not say that. I'm just saying that he's he is a aged veteran, right? He's older than Bijan, right? So there is more wear and tear on that body, right? So he's not, obviously I'm not saying that Derrick Henry is not Derrick Henry. It's still Derrick Henry, but it's the Derrick Henry of later age, right? So they have a home run hitter there.
Derrick Henry old?
I mean, you tell me how many years he's been in the league. Let's see.
He's vintage, but is he old?
I'm not calling him old. But just if you look at the average amount of time that running backs are at their prime, he has far exceeded that.
That's
right?
True,
and so
in his college career, he really wasn't the workhorse back. He shared the workload with Kenyon Drake. Mm-hmm. So, man,
but you've seen the
10 years.
I was about to say, you've seen how many carries he got in high school, right? There's a lot of wear and tear on that body, right? So I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying that Derrick Henry is not Derrick Henry. This is just a different Derrick Henry that we're seeing. Players evolve, right? And so obviously there's Derrick Henry. Obviously you have Lamar Jackson, who's the greatest rushing threat from the quarterback position that the league has ever seen. So it's going to be very tough. Obviously defenses have their biggest troubles handling a Lamar Jackson, and the biggest difference is they're going from Kirk Cousins, right, who looks like he might not belong in the NFL anymore, to I'm joking, just that one pass that he had to
it was bad.
It was no, but it technically wasn't his fault. I saw another clip of it. The guy had no clue what route he was running because he checked the route and he literally looks at Kirk and is like, "What am I doing? What am I doing?" So he's like, "I'll just run a comeback." When in reality it was a go route. So, bottom line, it's a totally different challenge. I think the only things that they can take away from it, that they can take from last game to this game is that they have to play with that same pack mentality. If you look at the way that they tackled Bijan Robinson, there was at least 3 or 4 guys on him every single time. And it's going to take, if not that, but more when it comes to Derrick Henry. Why? Because Derrick Henry is a much bigger guy than Bijan Robinson, right? And he's able to run through people much easier than Bijan Robinson can. So I say all that to say they have to swarm the ball. You have to try to cut his legs as soon as you can, but it's easier said than done for sure.
Absolutely. When you try to cut his legs, that's when he stiff arms you down to the ground. You don't want to be part of one of those Jordan highlight clips.
Nope.
But the one thing about the Ravens, you always know, is they're going to be a tough physical team. They're going to run the ball. They're going to stop the run. I was a little puzzled by the Falcons' game plan, and I know the Dolphins came into the game with the worst run defense in the NFL. But they didn't utilize any tight ends. I mean, that's where Miami is weak, and it softens you up for the run, blah, blah, blah. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of game plan the Ravens can create, especially with Lamar back. We know Lamar is a wild card, especially when he's running, scrambling. I think Anthony Weaver pointed out that he's got the longest hold the ball time in the NFL, but a lot of that is Lamar just backing up, waiting for one of his receivers to play scramble ball. So you got to play sticky coverage. It'll be interesting to see how this defense performs, especially since that was the first good game they actually played. Here's Anthony Weaver talking about the Baltimore Ravens defensive mentality. And keep in mind, not only was Anthony Weaver a member of that staff, he was also a player and starter on that team.
It's amazing, like that 2000 Super Bowl team and the culture and tradition that they kind of instilled within that organization has never left. And I think they honestly, they probably get a lot of credit for it, but it probably really starts with Ozzie Newsome, right? It probably starts with him, right? 2-time Hall of Famer as a GM and as a player coach. Like, he knows exactly what he wants in a player, in a coach. And you feel that all throughout the building. I just remember when I went in there as a player back in 2002, you felt an immense responsibility to uphold the standard, which means when you were on that field with those guys, you were only going to play it a certain way. And guys, particularly on defense, and I think it's found its way to the offensive side of the ball as well. Like, you know that when you hit that field, like, if you're not playing with your hair on fire, you won't last long. And I think because there's been such alignment in vision organizationally, starting with the owner, with Ozzie, Eric, John, and everybody in between, you've been able to have that kind of cohesion, and it's been able to carry on throughout. So again, I have a tremendous amount of respect and love for that organization and the people in it.
Now, Anthony Weaver's talking about one of the best run organizations in the NFL. I make the argument that don't judge them by a 2-5 record. You play a month without your starting quarterback. They're winning games with Tyler Snoop Huntley. Come on, people. But the culture that they've created is everlasting, or at least it's still there, even though Ozzie's so quote unquote retired, even though he still does the job. What I found interesting was Weaver said it comes from owner to GM to players. To coaches to players. Sounds like something we're trying to get to around here. So,
of course. No, I think, look, there is a famous quote that I like to employ every now and then. It's not necessarily going to be something that people are very fond of or anything, but this is my little sign that I try to give to the people every now and then.
Wow. I need you to give me the rationale for that, because I don't necessarily agree with that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's similar to what Weaver said, right? I think it is the guy at the top that sets the standard, sets the mentality, and that has to flow down. Like, that is the real trickle-down economics, right? The stuff that they tried to tell us in the 80s and stuff, tell y'all in the 80s, I wasn't born. That is not going to work. The real trickle-down economics, right, is the ownership sitting in center saying, this is what I want for my football team. These are the people that I want to hire. These are the type of guys that I want to get. And then that message being carried down from the general manager being able to hire a coach, right? Draft players that fit that mentality, because that's the one thing that I think the Ravens have done very well. They have gotten guys that fit a certain mold, that are tough, that are hard-nosed, that are going to play with a chip on their shoulder, regardless of the position, right? Like, to me, it's still mind-boggling that they still have Lamar Jackson, because that they were even able to get Lamar Jackson, because you think about how many teams passed up on him, right? And that, more than anything, I think ignited a fire within him, right? Because it's like, look, at the end of the day, I was a Heisman winner. I've done all these great things, and people still asking me, am I going to play running back? Am I going to play receiver? And funny enough, that was my first NFL combine, right? And I remember going to his press conference, because I'm just curious to see, what the hype is, all that stuff, and then all the questions are like, you playing quarterback? You playing quarterback? You playing quarterback? And I was like, yo, like, he just put together, like, he's 1 year removed from one of the best seasons that a quarterback has ever had in the NCAA, and you're asking him if he's going to play the position he's been playing since birth. Like, I say all that to say, look, when you have a great owner and you have an owner that is invested in the team, that this is his only project.
Oh, only project.
That this is his only project, right? It's difficult to get distracted. Not to say distractions are bad. Like, Stephen Ross, make your bread, make your money. I'm not pocket watching at all. But at the same time, if you look at an organization like the Eagles, right? How Jeffrey Lurie, this is his thing, right? He wants the Eagles to be good. And what are the Eagles? They're a good football team, right?
Yeah, well, they're a good team because they built a good culture. I don't necessarily know what Jeffrey Lurie has to do with the culture. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not saying that an owner shouldn't have another job, because you got to make your billion somehow.
You gotta make a billion somehow, for sure.
I don't necessarily agree with having. I don't want my owner to be hands-on. I don't want a Jerry Jones. Not to say.
Of course not. Of course not.
But you saying you want him around and involved, and
No, I didn't say that. I did not say that. I said that this is this is their passion project. Right? This is the thing that they want to do.
So you're saying this is not Steve Ross's passion project?
I'm not saying that this is Stephen Ross's passion project, but I believe that Hard Rock Stadium was the bigger get, right, for him, because of everything else he could do around it. Don't get me wrong, the Dolphins are, I'm sure.
That was a throw in. He's been trying to buy He's been trying to buy an NFL franchise since the 80s, and he bought a USFL franchise. Nobody would let him in until Wayne Huizenga let him in, and the Dolphins team just so happened to come with the stadium. Now, he's added a lot of sports entities, and he brought when he was bringing the Miami Open, I was like, "What you doing that for? How does that make sense?" And now he's got a facility for tennis, and it makes sense. You see him retrofit for tennis, and it makes sense. When they brought the F1 race, I was like, "How does that make sense? Are they just gonna go a circle around the stadium?" Well, now you see a track. Now you see a deck for cars for the pits. He's a builder. He's building Palm Beach right now. But the problem
why hasn't he been able to build the Dolphins in?
The problem I have with what you said is everything in his organization has been first class. Even the business side of the Dolphins, first class. I say this all the time, and people don't understand what I'm saying. How many times a week do you see them working on landscaping? They
almost every day.
They don't even have to cut the hedges, but they cutting the hedges. Like, you understand what I'm saying?
I get that, but that has nothing to do with the X's and O's and what happens in between the lines, right? And to me, I don't think it's too far outside the realm of possibility that when you're trying to do everything else right, you sometimes forget that the main thing is the main thing, right? The main thing got to stay the main thing.
Tom Garfinkel has run that side of the organization quite well in terms of the tennis, the F1, concerts, World Cup. I mean, they've done everything first class. So how come this side of the organization can't get it right? Because
the main thing's not the main thing. Like I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like, I think both things can be true, right? I think when you're focused on doing, and like, we should probably move off of this because we're kind of elongating. But I think sometimes when you're trying to do everything else right, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none, right? Like, when you're trying to do a lot, and there's nothing. Again, I don't necessarily care about what he's doing, all the other stuff. What I care about is the product on the field, right? The product on the field at times has been very lackluster. And so I just think that sometimes when you are focused on everything else, when it comes down to the football, you might not have the exact attention that this requires on hiring the people that could better
totally
run the
different process. Now I will acknowledge he's been not very good at hiring, but a lot of that is reputation you have, people wanting to work with you, offers that you make, the times and changes and decisions. I will say, leadership at the top been a little bit troublesome. But I also can tell you, I can't name anybody right now I want to pluck from wherever they are and put in that position other than Ozzie Newsome and say, oh, okay, I have ultimate confidence he's going to fix this.
Not even your boy, Louis Riddick?
I love and respect Louis Riddick. I think that's a talent selection home run, but I don't know if Louis Riddick can build a culture. I'm not saying that he can't, but this organization needs a culture overhaul. Not disagreeing with you from that standpoint. Let's address some of this improvements that we saw from the Falcons and whether it's going to carry over. The one thing that I have picked up this week that I found very interesting was there's a big hubbub about Frank Smith being on the sidelines and the energy, the organization, and the cleanliness of the operation that him being on the sideline creates. Now, he is coming from what he calls the fishbowl up top, and there you're talking through a headset, so everybody has to listen to the headsets, and not everybody has a headset. So you can't have a conversation with your offensive lineman. You can't have a conversation with your tight end. You can't have a conversation with your backs. Tua even said having Frank Smith on the side was helpful for him. And I honestly think when you come out of that Cleveland game and you heard Tua complaining about operation stuff he had to manage, I think Frank Smith was brought to the sidelines to handle a lot of that. While Mike McDaniel was doing the play calling. Frank Smith says this is going to remain in place. Do you think that it fixes some of their issues offensively?
I think we saw that it did a little bit, right? Like I think they might have had one pre-snap penalty if I remember correctly. But look, I think from what I've gleaned from Frank Smith so far is that he seems to be a straight shooter, two, he seems to care. Right. And so those are the two best things that you can have from a coach, right? Someone that cares about his players and someone that's going to tell it to you straight. And I think that is, what we saw, the product of which we saw on the field, right? When guys mess up, he was able to pull them aside and say, hey, like that is, this is how you correct it. This is what you did wrong. And let's move forward accordingly. When you have a great play, he's also going to be the guy that is going to praise you as well. Right. And so I think when you combine all that together, you see the product that happened on the field on this past Sunday. So the question becomes, can they replicate that short week Thursday versus a team that they know is going to come out swinging? Like I looked at this at the team to see where their injuries were heading into this week. Totally different from 4 weeks ago when it seemed like everybody on that roster was hurt, right? And so now let's see what they do. Obviously, they don't have the star D tackle. I don't know how to say his name, but I know his initials are NM, right? Matabuke, I think. But like they're not going to have him in the middle, but they still have, Marlon Humphrey. They still have, Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith. Like they still have guys, right? And so the question is, with that collective, what can the Dolphins do against that? Because to me, as much as you want the defense to try to dominate, try to insert their will over that Ravens offense, they're playing against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, right? You got to cut them some slack, right? So the question is going to be, will the offense be able to respond accordingly? To me, at least.
All
to
right,
me, because I can understand. Look, like, and I asked Tua this today. I asked you, when the defense performs like that, what sort of confidence do you get from that, right? And he gave a great answer. Like, it gives us all the confidence in the world, but then also gives us more opportunities, right? But now you're playing against an elite offense, or offense with elite players, right? It hasn't been elite so far, but an offense with elite players, right? What can you do to help out your defense, right? And that's the only thing you can do. To me, it's to score points.
Score seven, turn 7 into 3.
That's it. Bottom line.
Here's this is a period, probably a 4-game period, where they're going to have to play not only without Tyreek Hill, but without Darren Waller. We saw some very creative things in terms of the 6 offensive linemen. We saw some utilization with Ollie Gordon and Devon Achane in the backfield together. Utilize the creative play design. Obviously, now that they put that on film, teams are going to prepare for it. I don't necessarily know if the Ravens have time to prepare for it, but teams are going to. That's not going to blindside them. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you build on that? How do you continue to maintain that level of efficiency, which you had against the Falcons, offensively and defensively, to have success? Here's Tua talking about the effectiveness of using both backs in the backfield.
Well, I think it puts a strain and a stress on the defense when they kind of see how they want to match up, those guys in the backfield. And then it also gives the illusion of who could potentially get the ball in the run game with 31 and 2-8 in the back there. So I would say that it just allows stress to be put on those guys, and extra communication with them going different ways or going the same way with what they're trying to do and get done defensively.
Achane has 30 touchdowns, faster than any player in Dolphins history. Do you feel like he'll eventually be regarded as an NFL star? He feels to me like he's still a little under the radar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, after his rookie year, I think you could have seen that start to rise as for him to become a rising star in this league. And I think he's been one of the more consistent ones for us offensively in terms of the production he gives us and things that he can do, not just at the running back position, but at slot or at a receiver position as well.
Yeah, this is Achane plays a lot of wide receiver. He's a scat back, which I wrote about earlier this season. He's actually on pace for 1,000 rushing yards, which is his goal for the season. When you have him in the backfield and you have Ollie, who you're doing a lot of gap scheme runs, a lot of man blocking, and Ollie, it helps you create a balance. And that's what the Dolphins need in order to keep that play action game with Tua alive. Because when you are balanced, then the play action fakes work. Then the misdirection works. Then Tua can throw the ball in stride, as opposed to teams knowing he absolutely has to pass. Let's jump in his passing lanes. Let's get in these passing lanes for Tua. So it's all encompassing and it all connects together. They've been talking about it all season, but finally they actually showed you on the field how it all connects together. Let's get into the predictions of this game. I said that I'm not going to pick the Dolphins anymore until they actually produce a victory. Now, they did produce a victory against the Atlanta Falcons, but this is a different caliber of team. Now, I understand they got a worse record than the Atlanta Falcons, but they are the Baltimore Ravens. They are still Debo. So I'm going to go with a 24-21 Baltimore win. I want this team, just like you said, to keep pace offensively, because there are some people out there who believes that Tua can't score points without Tyreek. And I would tell you that that's not the case.
Yeah. I'm going to go 27-17 Ravens for sure. I just think Lamar is going to kind of have that chip on his shoulder. He's going to come back, put on a show in front of his home crowd. He's going to have aunties, uncles, nieces, nephews, everyone out there. And not to say that the Dolphins historically struggle against teams that have that running threat from the quarterback position, right? And you throw in Derrick Henry, to me, it's just unbelievably lethal. I just don't think that the Dolphins defense has enough to swarm that because, especially let's think about those injuries at safety on the back end. Like, it'll be interesting to see, who actually is able to suit up because why? The sticky coverage that you mentioned, right? When stuff starts to break down, you have to find a man. And I'm just worried about even though Dante Trader's played very well this year, I'm just worried about some of the younger players and just trying to do that. We'll see.
Hey,
we'll see. Anything can happen.
Somebody got to stick with Zay Flowers.
Someone's got to be with him.
Somebody got to cover DeAndre Hopkins. So it's going to be a long day for the Dolphins secondary, especially with safeties. Every single safety on this roster is battling some kind of injury. Some of them are fingers. 2 of them are fingers. Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ife Melifonwu. I didn't see any cast on Ife Melifonwu, but that doesn't mean that they won't play with casted hands. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out for the Dolphins. On that note, we will be back after the game on Friday to give you our wrap-up of what happened in Thursday night's nationally televised game against the Baltimore Ravens.